David, I greatly appreciate your time. I mean, from everybody at BizWorld, we so appreciate your time as a mentor and as a coach. Like, how long have you been involved with BizWorld now?
I've worked in person with BizWorld as well, BizWorld Japan, um, where I was flying to a relatively remote school. It was on an island and way up on the mountains in this island, which was interesting to help them get things launched around here. And then on remotely with BizWorld, yes, I think 3 or 4, maybe 5, but I think 3 or 4 cohorts.
Wow. Three, four, maybe five cohorts. And then BizWorld Japan also. Is that where you started, or you started with BizWorld in the US?
Don't remember how I got started. I was doing stuff with BizWorld Japan, and then they had shared a link to the pitch day, and I ended up at the pitch day, and then I emailed Charlene Baca. Is that right?
Yep.
To be like, well,
Yep. Correct.
this seems like a good thing. What might I do to participate in this in some capacity? And that's how I think it all started.
Beautiful. Well, we appreciate it. I mean, what stood out to you with it when you first thought this could be interesting? I want to get involved with it.
So the ed tech consulting stuff I had been doing was somewhat similar, and but always with adults, and it was always for profit, and there was always quite a bit of money involved. And I was doing some consulting with groups, and I found that there was a lot of resistance oftentimes with getting real feedback from a real person, especially education stuff, because the companies tended to be tech heavy and education light, and trying to build
Gotcha.
platforms and tools for educators and not really having a good idea about what it meant to be an educator, the kind of the rigors of their average teacher. They're very similar from country to country, especially if you're talking about elementary school, high school, primary, secondary, right? And so I kind of not burned out on that, but it was like, all right, people are maybe not really all that interested in the feedback that I'm providing, but I still want to be in this arena somehow. I'm not trying to necessarily get rich off of it or whatever, but seeing students involved in it was kind of an out and an in, because it's like, all right, well, these folks are in school, maybe they're making money. Some of them are trying to do that, or maybe not. That's kind of irrelevant. But I have a ton of experience with pitching. I have a ton of experience with watching judges and potential funders go through their decision-making process and the kind of questions that they were asking these adult groups who were in the startup phase. And I thought, okay, well, here is maybe a slightly less abrasive arena for me to channel that information and see what I can do. And it's still really in the education realm for me, which is important.
Yeah. Great. Great. So you had that passion for education. You were working in, you said, more of the tech space around
Yeah.
education, but a lot of those players were focused too much on the tech and not actually the underlying education that
Yeah,
matters.
exactly. There was a lot. I heard a phrase either similar to or identical to, well, when they see what we're offering them, they're going to fall in love with it. It's like, all right, guys, I don't think so. But you'll see.
And so it sounds like BizWorld stood apart a little bit in that realm, that we're actually focused heavy on the education. We're involving educators and
Yeah.
students as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. And also nobody there was a professional, right? None of the people who are putting together the teams are professionals. So they're not, they don't have as much on the line at that point as the adult startup founders have, right? They're not necessarily trying to, I don't say bend the rules, but they don't have to go all out. They still have homework. They still have prom to think about. They still have, their violin recital to take care of this weekend, as opposed to grinding nonstop, burning the candle at both ends, to try and get another $25,000 or whatever.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying the YES program, Young Entrepreneurs versus other startup
Yeah.
founders.
Yeah. This is very much a side hustle. It may even be too much to call it a side hustle for the YES participants, right? Where it might be everything. They may have sold their houses or whatever. Some of the startup founders.
Mm. Yeah, what a unique program,
Yeah.
honestly, that man, some of these high schoolers and college kids, they have so much
Yeah.
going on and they're still trying to grow
Still doing it.
businesses.
Yeah.
Wow, it's crazy. Like what type of individual do you think it takes to actually succeed in the YES program?
Yeah. I don't know because, I certainly was not that. I certainly am not that, uh, which is part of the reason why I like to provide support to that because I can recognize the difference between kind of what I bring to the table and what some of these folks bring to the table. Um, it's a Yeah, I don't quite get it. If I'm totally honest, I don't know what the kind of composition of is of somebody who is in high school, studying for the tests, studying for standardized tests, participating in extracurricular activities, and trying to run a business, and really, having meetings with other high school students and stuff to put this kind of stuff together. It's way above my head currently. Um, so there is a yeah, I really don't have an answer to that because when they put me in touch with, I think it was my fourth, it was my third, um, yes participant, and this guy had a business already, and this is when they asked me to be a business coach instead of a mentor, I think, and I said all right, and I figured that it was going to be some kid with some idea, which it had been before, and no, this guy had a business, and I almost got on the horn with them. I was like, hey, I think you made a mistake. This kid knows more about business than I know. So, but it ended up being um, it was very successful. Obviously, I could bring things to him that he wasn't aware of, despite the fact that he already had a fairly successful business and still running it. He gave me a lot of really positive feedback, stuff that I felt like, I hope this guy doesn't feel like it's a waste of time to meet with me. But he definitely didn't, based on his feedback to me. And we're still in contact, actually.
Wow. Wow, that's great. David, you're not alone where a lot of our coaches and mentors end up feeling the same way that the entrepreneurs are actually teaching them things at the
Yeah.
same time. What do you think is it that makes for a great mentor or a great coach potentially for people who are considering it?
Oh, well, one of my mentors, maybe my first true mentor, and he and I were talking about this kind of work, which he has a lot of experience in, and he's very successful at it. And he said, you can't tell these kids what to do. You can't. And we weren't talking about the kids at that time. We were talking about adult startup founders, and it was like your role is not really to tell them what to do. Your role is to be a sounding board and provide feedback when relevant, and and to kind of facilitate and support the decisions that they're making about their time and their investment and their vision. And you have to kind of be on board once you get on board. So somebody who can adapt like that, somebody who recognizes that you're not in a position to shape or direct um, what's going on, even if you have opinions about it, and you likely will. Um, you're in a position
Mhm.
to um, reflect, I think, what the individual is telling you and provide perspective that may be beyond or outside of what these very capable, in this case, young entrepreneurs are already bringing to the table.
Mm. I love that, right? Mentors are really there to be that sounding board, to give an outside perspective. Because I'm sure, as you and I both know, if you get too close to an idea, you can start to miss things that are seemingly obvious. So simply just an outside, wise perspective is really
Yeah,
all it
yeah.
takes.
There was something else.
Yeah.
I'll think of it later, but anyway, yeah, that's basically. I think that's the bread and
Okay,
butter. I think.
great.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, David, let's rewind back a little bit, right? I want to feature you, talk about your story. Tell us a little bit, what all are you working on these days?
So these days, I am trying to just really getting started on putting together a. I don't know what it's going to be, a platform, an organization. I'm not entirely sure yet. That is really bringing together what I'm learning about, what I'm learning from coaching tennis and being a ski instructor, and putting that kind of layering that on top of and weaving that into all of my education background. I didn't expect that there would be a whole lot, but I really am finding more and more that there are a lot of connections, and there's a lot that can be brought from the education field. Um, what goes into being just a focused individual, I suppose, is really what it is, because
Mm.
tennis is not a particularly dangerous sport, but it is a very complicated sport. And skiing is a fairly dangerous sport right from the go. Um, and so people have different kinds of frustrations and different kinds of concerns, and being able to effectively communicate about those and identify with those, I think, is making a big difference in ways that I didn't anticipate. So I'm kind of just getting started on, like I say, weaving these concepts together and seeing what comes from that, because it's kind of still surprising to me. And other than that, I work in a university, and I help students with test prep, and that kind of still very tightly connected to education, the education world.
Wow. Interesting. So working on a new program that it sounds like is going to combine the experience and learnings from your coaching with your background and passion for education.
Yeah, I think that pretty well sums it up. I think that there's probably, from the looks of it, it's going to be a lot more of bringing sports education into the classroom, not in terms of teaching people sports, but in terms of, because I work a lot with communication and conversation and language, and there are a lot of
Mm.
hurdles and roadblocks that exist in that area as well. And I think that they are basically identical to the kind of frustrations that people find in sports. Um, and I think connecting it a little bit more closely to kind of at least the idea of a physical activity, I think is going to free a lot of people into sort of easing their way into being more communicative and learning language more quickly and more easily. Let's see.
Well, let's see. I'm excited to watch along and follow
Thanks.
along because that idea of bringing sports education, right, into more of the classroom, specifically to help with
Yeah.
communication, learning how to communicate better and like teamwork
Yes.
better. It's interesting because BizWorld is entrepreneurship and business education, but more to build those life
Yeah.
skills. It sounds like your correlation is sports education also to build similar life skills like
Yeah.
communication.
And BizWorld is a great analogy, right? Because I don't, anyway, when I'm working with these individuals, focus too much on the money making part of it, because number one, I don't have that background really yet. That's kind of they have other people to focus on that with, but that's not really what I want to be talking to them about anyway, right? The whole idea is make as much money as you can, as quickly as you can. That's not what it's all about. And so it's nice to be able to stay away from that, but still be in that, um, sort of general category. And it's a bonus, I think, to not have to get into that, and nobody's gonna be on the streets if their business idea doesn't work out, right? They're still at home, most of them with mom and dad, which is great. So you have that little bit of added freedom as well.
It's great. Yeah, man. They can focus on building real long-term sustainable businesses, impactful businesses, not just having to
Yeah.
chase money and make as much money as they
Yeah.
possibly need.
And another thing to think about, as you well know, I'm overseas, and so even the meeting coordinating aspect of it is impressive to me. The fact that I can talk to a 16-year-old and be like, look, I'm in a different time zone. Communicating with me is going to be a little bit complicated. Let's figure, there are a lot of adults domestically who can't get to, as seamlessly put these things together, coordinate this. So that's another part of it that I think really can't be overlooked.
Yeah, these are really amazing young entrepreneurs and unique individuals. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, David, what's a lesson maybe from your background as a coach in sports specifically that you end up passing on to these young entrepreneurs that you're mentoring and coaching on that side of the realm?
Definitely, uh, don't try as hard as you can not to assume that you are trying to build the perfect thing from your head. Build a thing, put it out there, use the feedback to update and get used to that as quickly as you can. Otherwise, it's so difficult to start. And I see this in education and I see this in sports as well. And I definitely see it with something like building a business. You want to have the perfect idea and then you want to put the perfect idea out there. And it just doesn't work like that. And the sooner people can be, I think, disabused of that idea, the faster they will see progress and the more joy I think is involved in it, as opposed to this, what's wrong with me, or when am I going to have this idea? Or it's like, you're not going to have that idea. Get over it. It's not how it works. But that's not something that really is taught probably anywhere, right?
Uh, Definitely not informal, classic education. Like that is very much a lesson that needs to be taught from the outside around
Yes,
imperfect
imperfect
action, huh?
action is exactly it. Yeah, and those you need that feedback. You need that external and internal feedback from doing something that doesn't, or at least doesn't suit whatever purpose it is that you have in mind. And then okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do that anymore right now, whatever the case is, or it needs to be done a little bit more like this or a little bit less like this. That's invaluable. That's not, nobody can really tell you that.
Mm. No, that's great. I love that. What first inspired you to become an educator and a coach?
I didn't want to be an educator. My mom said, look, you graduated from college. You've got this job. Why don't you get your substitute credential just so you have something to do no matter kind of where you are? This is when I was still in California. Um, so I took her up on that. And I then did shortly thereafter become a substitute teacher. And I couldn't stomach being a substitute teacher for more than one school year. Just didn't seem like a very effective use of my degree. It didn't seem like a very sustainable kind of professional activity, although it was very reliable. For just by coincidence, I ended up in a place where I worked every day of the year in different classrooms, in different schools, in different districts. It was just very fortunate time of in education, I guess, for me. Um, and then I met some non-Americans and they said, well, you can be an educator overseas as well. And I didn't know that. I had never heard of that. And I looked into it and
Yes.
took off and just kept on doing that.
Well, kept on traveling and having new experiences or educating
Kept on
overseas.
being an educator really more than anything. I thought, okay, well, am I going to continue to work in education? And I just kept on enjoying it and kept on finding that I was benefiting from educating. I was learning from educating in ways that were meaningful to me. And coaching really came up kind of similarly because I just couldn't stomach working in an office for another minute. And I had no idea what I was going to do outside of an office. Um, but because of my tennis background, I had reached out to somebody long before and got an email back that was like, hey, are you still around? Do you still want to be a coach? And got certified and have been doing that. And then the ski instructing came up as well because I was talking to one of my tennis students and I said, oh, we just conversation really. I said, are you guys going skiing this winter? And they said, oh, why are you a ski instructor as well? I said, I'm not, but that's an interesting idea. And then 6 months later, I was a ski instructor as well. So it's kind of been a lot of happenstance, but it's a lot of that not being afraid to be a beginner, I think, which is so important. And these young entrepreneurs are very much in that realm as well.
Thanks for sharing. What a great example. Like, don't be afraid to be a
Yeah.
beginner. And then also the taking imperfect action, right? Just be willing to learn and adjust based on the feedback that
Yeah.
you're getting,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah. So it really resonates with me to work with them because I can say these little things that they're not so meaningful necessarily, but they made a big difference for me. And I keep these are kind of mantras at this point, I think, more than anything. And to be able to just share that with somebody who's struggling with something that's okay, well, this is exactly that thing that I was dealing with, however many years ago or however recently, has been very effective. And I can reuse them, right? Every time I meet a new mentee, they're still just as valuable. So it's perfect.
It's so valuable. Like, I love that. I mean, so David, right, you've been a mentor now for a long time. You know a lot about mentorship, and it sounds like you teach leadership when it comes to coaching and then in the YES program. Let's see, like you've lived and worked across Asia and the US. What has teaching internationally taught you around mentorship and leadership?
Uh, Interesting. The misconception that things are really uh, clearly different from place to place. And, there can be this belief that things are better here because of this, or things are easier in this part of the world because of this. I really think it's that's not how it is. The way that it is that different places have different strengths for different reasons, and they can all be leveraged. And if you can um, harness your strength, you can leverage it, and you can pick up in the areas that you need more, whatever it is, support, or you need to grow. But everywhere is bringing a strength with it. There is no place that is uh, devoid of some kind of asset, and all of these cultures are really bringing with them different strengths that people really sustain themselves with, whether they know it or not.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is that there isn't this super clear divide, right? Let's just say US versus
Yeah.
Japan. What you're seeing is that everywhere has different strengths that they can bring to the table, and that it's sort of focusing on those strengths and the unique strengths that, different countries might
Yeah,
have.
absolutely. And if you try to, I think furthermore, if you try to downplay whatever your area's strength is, kind of in favor of maybe where you're wanting to go, or where the area that you appreciate more, respect more, or whatever, you kind of end up leveraging your, well, I don't know if you want to call it a domestic strength, or your internal strength. You end up leveraging it one way or the other, and it ends up paying dividends. Uh, and you can you can lead the charge in it paying those dividends, or you can just kind of benefit on the back end of it. I think leading the charge obviously it pays dividends more quickly, right, and more thoroughly.
Leading the charge absolutely pays dividends
Yeah,
quicker and more thoroughly, more
more
meaningful
meaningful as well.
also.
Yeah, you don't have as much like identity
It
crisis. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, it makes me think about, it's more meaningful. Like, how meaningful is the work that you do as a mentor for Yes and for BizWorld? And are there any moments that you could share maybe about a Yes participant that really moved you?
Yeah, the one that I was mentioning earlier, John, and should I mention his company? His company was Night Vision. It's a clothing and maybe more now brand. He was, like I said, he was already well into it, had been for a number of years when he and I started working together. Um, he emailed me. I was there from start to finish. And I don't think that he was given any funding or anything like that via the Yes platform or the pitch days. I don't think he ended up winning any of those. But I got an email from him a few months later, thanking me and saying how I guess significant, meaningful it had been to work together. And I
Mm,
guess it didn't occur to me that um, it's that impactful, right? That I would get an email. And so that then inspired me to loop him back in the next cohort to ask if he could provide me with some insight about some social media related work that I might provide for my current mentee. And so that was the first time where it had even occurred to me to kind of, I don't know, ride the coattails is the right phrase for this, or loop somebody else, loop my
mm.
mentee back in for some kind of mentorship for me to provide more mentorship to someone else. So that was a very unique combination that took place that time. That was just this most recent cohort.
Unique to say the least. How amazing, right? That you, as a mentor to your mentee, ended up meaning so much to you and providing you
Yeah.
even with value that you swung all the way
Yeah.
back around and helped a future entrepreneur through your
Yeah.
past
And
mentee.
he just, the bottom line is he just knows more than I do. He just knows about it more substantially than I do. So who better to ask?
Absolutely, absolutely. What's the emotional payoff, like for you as a mentor? Like, what makes it even worth your time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. What makes it worth my time? Just the fact that they show up at the next meeting, frankly. The fact that these teenagers are getting up early or staying up late or sacrificing a part of their weekend to have an hour long, sometimes longer conversation with me for what is it? What is it, 3 months or something?
12
Yeah,
weeks.
a long time.
Yeah, 12
That's more
weeks.
time than I spend with a lot of professional colleagues, more consistently, and and they talk about real stuff as well. They're doing real things. The last one, World Patch, Alex was talking about his school having some event, and it just wasn't very clear to me whether or not that was really going to happen. And the next week he shows up, he says, "Yeah, so we went to this event, and here's what happened." It's like, oh, this is very, very fast paced for these guys, and they're getting in there. He's talking to school principals and school administrators and getting the okay from people. This is real deal. So even just keeping up with those,
It is. I mean, they work so
yeah,
hard
even just keeping up with their actual work is satisfying enough, actually, come to think of it.
to actually see entrepreneurs that are putting
Yeah.
in the work, like listening, wanting more help, feedback, and
Yeah.
taking
Really,
action.
it's just a very impressive the speed at which they take action. And so you have to then show up for them because they're doing what they're upholding their end of the bargain and then some. So that's the agreement, right?
That's the agreement for sure. David, I appreciate your time. I don't want
Okay.
to take too much. See, we're already a minute
No,
over
no rush.
here. But I'm curious, my sort of towards the end of my last trains of thoughts is, you just said it's so satisfying to just have somebody listen to your feedback and then actually take action on it. I find so fulfilling also. I'll give help all day long if somebody
I
actually
agree.
listens and
Right.
takes action, right? What would you say to maybe a fellow professional who's thinking about becoming a mentor, but isn't sure that they have the time or the skills?
Um, you have the skills, whatever, and this will help you identify those skills more cleanly, more definitively. You will develop skills through this as well. Being a mentor doesn't mean that you bring all of the skills with you, locked and loaded. You add to your toolkit as you go through it. Um, and for me, the big part of the time thing is that, of course, I don't have time for it, but you make time for it. And part of that's what feels good about it, right? That's one of the major satisfying parts of it for me. Um, So that's it. It's like, okay, this is a little bit of a sacrifice, but that's the whole point.
It
Right.
is. I like it. And this feedback piece around that you have the skills and you're actually going to figure out more about yourself and your own skill
Yeah.
set through being a
Yeah.
mentor.
And you have to listen to yourself talking to these young professionals, or not, sorry, not even young professionals, young entrepreneurs. It gives you a lens back into what's going on in your own world, well, which is an interesting, expected byproduct.
Super interesting. Yeah. What an amazing
Yeah.
byproduct, huh? Um, Love it. David, one of the last questions I had noted here that I'm not sure if you'll have an answer for or not, but it's the concept around like what would you say to a potential donor around whether their support actually makes a difference?
Yeah. I don't really have an answer for that. That is based on anything tangible, but it has to be the case that this is donor funded. I'm aware of the fact that this is donor funded. This is the real deal because I live and work in places and in education in particular where these concepts are not yet reality. The idea of teaching young people entrepreneurship is meaningless. And what that means is that everybody is being educated to work for someone else, and that people do not, it's not part of the, I guess maybe like the Zeitgeist, right? The Zeitgeist of these areas that like give young people an opportunity to thrive and explore their own ideas. And it's absolutely necessary. There's no question about that for the general proliferation of society and for the betterment of these young people's lives. So anything, and that's another part. This goes back to the other question you asked about why I do it, and it's because yeah, if you're not giving them these ideas, it means that people whose ideas are already worn thin are the only people creating ideas, and it's dangerous. It makes for a dangerous space.
Say
Yeah,
that again. Um, Love it. And then lastly, here, I
that's
know I
okay.
say this
That's
always
okay.
a million
And
times in every interview that I do. I'm like, this is my last question that I have. You mentioned earlier that there's things that you can actually use and sort of repeat between cohorts, between mentees, right? What do you think is a lesson that every young entrepreneur out there needs to learn, should know?
I don't know if this is still the language used for this idea, but A/B test stuff. Create the thing that you think is the best way to do it and have an alternative and run that thing simultaneously and let the let the market tell you which one is the better idea. You'll save yourself just a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and a lot of frustration, I think. Let You have to go out and let other people tell you what they prefer. There's no two ways about it. One way or the other, that's going to be the end result. So do it because you want to. Don't do it because you then had to.
Thick skin to be able to do
Absolutely.
that, huh?
Yeah. And you're not going to develop it out of nowhere. So better that you develop it because you're willing to, um, I guess, claw your way through running multiple versions of whatever you're doing rather than having somebody tell you, we just don't want that. And then you're just stuck, right? You're at a dead end.
Dave, thank you so
Oh,
much,
gee.
man. I really
Yeah,
appreciate your time. You've any last thoughts around the program or just education in general?
I couldn't be any bigger of a fan of the way the whole thing goes, and that's another part that makes it really easy to participate. Is that it's clearly being very well run and increasingly well run, and so that's just a nice thing to be a part of. Especially as an educator, you see a lot of things that are run very questionably, and this is not one of them, and so it's hard to really not continue to participate. So anything else that I can do, please also let me know. Whatever. Yes, the answer is yes. Just let me know.
Thank you so much. You do more than enough already. It's so greatly
Thank you.
appreciated.